It was the night before the world was set to ring in the new millennium, but in one quiet suburban neighborhood in Tokyo, Japan, a horror was unfolding that would shock the nation and remain unsolved for decades. The Miyazawa family, just a normal, loving family, was brutally murdered in their own home in Setagaya, Tokyo, on the night of December 30th to 31st, 2000. But what was even more chilling than the murders themselves was the fact that the killer didn't flee after the attack. He stayed. And in the hours that followed, he left behind a trail of eerie clues that only deepened the mystery. This is the tragic, haunting, and still unsolved story of the Setagaya Family Murders, a case that continues to captivate and terrify to this very day. It was a cold winter night when tragedy struck the Miyazawa family in their suburban home in Setagaya. Mikio Miyazawa, 44, his wife Yasuko, 41, and their two young children, 8-year-old Niina and 6-year-old Rei, were brutally murdered in what appeared to be a random and senseless attack. The killer broke into the house around midnight, slipping into the second-floor bathroom through an open window. The house was quiet, the family unaware of the nightmare that was about to unfold. The murderer first attacked Rei, strangling the innocent boy to death in his sleep. The little boy's murder was swift, a silent, terrifying end in the night. Mikio, likely disturbed by the sounds coming from Rei's room, rushed upstairs to intervene. But what he didn't know was that he was walking into a deadly trap. The killer turned on him, stabbing Mikio in the head with a sashimi knife. The force of the blow was so strong that part of the blade broke off inside Mikio's skull. Despite his injuries, Mikio fought back, struggling to defend himself against the brutal attacker, but it was no use. The killer was relentless. Yasuko, Mikio's wife, was next. The killer turned his attention to her, stabbing her repeatedly with the broken sashimi knife, before finishing the job with another knife found in the house, a santoku knife. Little Niina, the 8-year-old girl, was the last to fall. She was attacked with the same brutal force as her parents, stabbed in a senseless act of violence. Once the family was slaughtered, the killer did not flee the scene. Instead, he stayed in the house. For hours, he wandered the Miyazawa's home, seemingly taunting the police with his ability to remain unseen, using their things, living in their space. This unusual behavior would become one of the most disturbing aspects of the case. He used the family's computer, accessed the internet, and even ate their food. The refrigerator was ransacked, with bottles of barley tea and 4 ice creams devoured. He ate melon and even sat down to relax. Strangely, he left behind no trace of his actions, as though trying to erase any evidence that might link him to the crime. In the bathroom, he left his feces without flushing, and there were indications that he may have even taken a nap on the sofa. He rummaged through the family's drawers, dumping papers and money on the floor, though curiously, he didn't take much, just enough to suggest he was searching for something. It wasn't about the money or valuables, it was something more sinister. Some believe the killer may have been looking for something specific, perhaps a connection to the family, or perhaps he was simply enjoying the chaos he had created. The crime scene itself seemed to tell a story. There was an eerie, almost methodical nature to the way the killer had moved through the house. Even more disturbing, there were signs that the killer had treated his own injuries using the family's first aid kit. The blood and traces of his activities seemed to indicate a man who was not in a rush, a killer who was comfortable in the house of his victims. The family's computer offered another unsettling clue. In the early hours of December 31st, the killer used the computer to briefly connect to the internet. From 1:18 a.m. to 1:23 a.m., the internet connection was active. This piece of evidence added a chilling dimension to the case. How could the killer have stayed so long? And why would he take such a risk, using a device that could potentially link him to the crime. Hours passed, and at 10:40 a.m., Yasuko's mother, Haruko, arrived at the house to check on her daughter after being unable to reach her by phone. She made the horrific discovery of the bodies. Haruko's shock and terror were palpable as she stumbled upon the brutal scene of her daughter's murder. Her quick thinking led her to call the police, but by the time they arrived, the killer was long gone, leaving no trace behind. The police launched an extensive investigation, and they found a wealth of clues that seemed to point them toward the killer's identity, yet they remained no closer to solving the case. The killer had left his DNA, fingerprints, and even blood at the scene, but none of it matched any known criminal profiles in the database. The investigation seemed to go nowhere. Theories about the killer's identity began to surface. One intriguing lead came when police analyzed the killer's feces, discovering traces of string beans and sesame seeds. This odd clue suggested that the killer may have eaten these foods the day before the murders. The investigation also uncovered that the sashimi knife used in the killings had been purchased in Kanagawa Prefecture, and the killer's clothes were traced back to a store in the same region. But despite these breakthroughs, the police were still unable to connect the evidence to a suspect. The killer had also left behind a variety of personal items at the crime scene: a scarf, a hip bag, a jacket, gloves, and even a shirt. These items were analyzed, and police were able to trace some of them back to specific locations, but they didn't lead to any solid leads. Among the most unsettling discoveries was a pair of shoes found at the scene, which were traced back to South Korea, though they had been sold by a British sports shoe company. One of the most significant breakthroughs came from the police analysis of the suspect's blood. A DNA analysis of the blood left behind revealed that the killer was male, likely of mixed descent, with maternal DNA suggesting a European origin and paternal DNA pointing to East Asia. This clue sent the investigation in a new direction, with police considering the possibility that the killer might not have been Japanese at all. As the years went by, the case became a national obsession. New technologies and investigative methods, including DNA analysis and 3D printing, were employed in an attempt to solve the case, but the killer remained elusive. The investigation was one of the largest in Japanese history, involving over 246,000 officers and more than 12,000 pieces of evidence, yet no arrests were made. In the years since the murders, there have been various attempts to revive the investigation, but the case remains unsolved. The Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department continues to appeal for information, with a reward of 20 million yen still being offered for any leads that might result in the killer's capture. The investigation into the Setagaya family murders has led to significant changes in Japanese law, particularly in regards to the statute of limitations for crimes punishable by the death penalty. The case became a symbol of the need for justice, not just for the Miyazawa family, but for the countless other unsolved cases in Japan. It also raised important questions about the use of DNA evidence and the potential for new technologies to solve cold cases. Despite the passage of years, the search for the killer continues. The Setagaya family murders are a reminder that even the most heinous crimes can remain unsolved. If you have any information that could help bring closure to this case, no matter how small, please come forward. The Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department is still actively seeking leads, and there is a substantial reward for information leading to the killer's arrest. The Miyazawa family's tragic story is a haunting reminder of the fragility of life and the darkness that can lurk in the most unexpected places. Will we ever uncover the truth? Only time will tell. But for now, the case remains one of Japan's most chilling unsolved mysteries. Make sure to subscribe to Open Files of True Horror, hit the notification bell,